All right, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Today is July 1st, 2020, and I'm back with another Wednesday edition of the live show. And I thought today we would take a look through the open trades, maybe the pending trades, seeing how it goes, and maybe do kind of a quick show this week. I know this is a holiday shortened week and 4th of July. The market celebrates the 4th of July on Friday. So tomorrow is the last trading day of the week. We're off kind of a big start here on July 1st. Hopes for a COVID vaccine news broke this morning. And of course, we've heard that before. And it's funny because right here, May 18th, this day right here, this this sort of melt up. I don't know if I'd call it a melt up, but it was a big rally. Big rally kicked off right here on the exact same news that we got this morning, which is progress is being made on a vaccine for COVID. Interestingly enough, so we had the big sell off and then we rallied, and the market was kind of stalled out in this area. I just happen to have the SPY up instead of the SPX, but market kind of stalled out in this area here, which seemed like sort of a reasonable, bounce back from perhaps an overreaction. Hard to tell, but for whatever reason, the market did decide that it was going to rally off the lows, and then so it reached this sort of area here, which was just below the initial sort of sell off here. This was This sell-off here was incredible. I mean, there was, over 1,000 points down on the Dow, and people were freaking out and that, and then of course this, the big washout. But anyway, so the rebound took it right back up to this level, and it sort of kind of, acted like maybe it was gonna roll over or stall out or something. It got real choppy here, and then this morning on May 18th that I have circled, the news broke that that company mRNA, right, on this day, they came out with news, hopes for COVID vaccine, and that was a Monday morning too, just like today. That lit a fire under the market, and it continued to just rally all the way up to this recent high here. So there you have it. And so this time around, you've got basically, I think I saw like, yeah, breaking news. Pfizer and something called BioNTech's early positive results for a vaccine candidate. And you got something on CNBC right now I'm watching. So anyway, um, you know, it is what it is. And there's a lot of crazy news out there and a lot of things that are affecting the market right now. And, geez, I saw sometime last week on a couple of these down days, I think that I saw news where the market was worried about Joe Biden becoming the next president because he's talking about, rolling back tax cuts, and he's talked like sort of anti-Wall Street and that type of thing, and raising raising taxes, capital gains taxes, and that. So anyway, who knows? But there's always a reason that the market moved, right? But it's questionable where the actual economy is, and it's even more questionable is how related the stock market is to the current state of the economy. And a lot of weird stuff going on right now, but so the simplest thing, I suppose, that we can look at here is just draw some simple trend lines on the chart. I've had different trend lines drawn in different ways, and I've seen people, I believe at one point. Well, let's see. I think I had a trend. I'm pretty sure I had a trend line drawn from there to there last week. Sometimes I just delete the trend lines off of here so I can just look at the chart, but that's what I had drawn last week. So there's no question that there is support below and that there's a bid in the market, and there's no question that the administration and the powers that be are looking at the stock market as basically a proxy for, how well everything's doing. So it's sort of the last thing that's really being that's looking okay, that's looking good. I mean, everything else, the pandemic, they talked about wave 2 and that, but the wave 1 never stopped, and now you've got 4th of July weekend, you've got a lot of places that have reclosed beaches and bars and stuff like that. And so, you know, the the whole the whole pandemic has never really gone away. And of course, the job picture, I guess the job numbers come out tomorrow. And, I sort of I think there's probably roughly 20 million people that are still, it's the continuing claims is the thing to watch, right? I mean, if you think about it, like, in this sell off here, 40 million people filed for, over 40 million filed for unemployment. And then some of those jobs have come back, but it's hard to imagine in the consumer economy that we're in. It's hard to imagine that the market can continue to do extremely well if you've got like Great Depression type of unemployment. And so, the other thing is that the unemployed people are getting an extra $600 a week, which is, and I know you guys have seen the story, which is more than a lot of them were making actually working, right? And there's tons of stories out there about people that are making more money being unemployed than they were working. And so, anyway, long story short, there's you've probably seen this. There's a lot of questions about A, whether it'll get extended at all, right? Because it runs out at the end of July. And then B, um, it's if you got say, roughly 20 million people unemployed, and then all of a sudden, their income is cut off, then what? So anyway, it's a mess. And as we approach the election, things seem to be getting even more dysfunctional. So it's gonna be a wild sort of second half to the year, right? So as of as of yesterday, the close of the first half of the year, I think the S&P was down like 5% or something. I mean, you're not that far off of the highs, to be honest with you. So pretty amazing considering the state of affairs out there. But it is what it is. You got a ton of support down here. This is, there's big support levels, just sort of, I should be on the SPX chart, but there's just a ton of support down here. So, and no matter what the news is, it seems like the market's extremely resilient. And so it is what it is. And of course, I think the Fed's balance sheet has a big correlation to the market. I saw a post the other day that showed the stock market and the Fed balance sheet, and basically like right here, like right when the market turned the corner is when the Fed's balance sheet just like ramped up, and then they've kind of met up here. So, and there's a lot of support. I think that the stock market is pretty is well, there everybody's considering it to be like a really super important gauge. I mean, everything else is going to hell in a handbasket, so at least the stock market's not melting down, and so people think that I feel a little bit better about that, I suppose. But anyway, it is what it is. And there's a lot of people are, extremely bullish here. We had some weird days. Let me go over to the SPX here. We had some weird days recently, right? So we have like this level of resistance up here, right? It's a pretty, little 3150, 3160, up in that area. That's a pretty significant level of resistance because let's see, extend this over a little bit. There you go. In the near term anyway, looking at the very near term here, that little sort of area right there, I think is going to present some fairly significant overhead resistance, just because you can see the, the times that it tried to poke up there. So there's still a little ways to go to get up there. What's more interesting is sort of the up down days that we've had since this sell off, right? These long range days where you get like sell off and then a big up day, and then more recently you had kind of like this little topping candle. If this was a candlestick, that'd be like a little sort of topping type of candle. And so up, or I'm sorry, down, up, and then finally sort of broke the pattern here. And like even as we speak, the market seems to kind of be at a little bit of a resistance point. And I don't know how much like the end of the first half of the year and the beginning, like the first day of the month's typically strong, right? So I would look for maybe, a little continuation rally. um, the market likes to rally ahead of holiday weekends too. So, or should I say, they like to make sure that the market holds together ahead of holiday weekends. It makes everybody feel a little bit better and go out and spend some money. Although it's going to be an interesting 4th of July weekend. Fireworks are canceled in most places, and people are not going to be out, in big crowds celebrating Independence Day and all that good stuff. So it is what it is. Um, but so far so good. Market kind of holding it together or whatever. Um, I think if the market was like really, cascading lower, that people wouldn't feel nearly as good about where we are. So I personally think that the market is somewhat ahead of the reality of the economy, but that's just par for the course. So anyway, without further ado, it's enough talking about the market. And I didn't even look at the other indexes or anything, or the sectors. Sectors are pretty interesting, and I'll tell you something that right now. So what I want to do is look at these open trades here, but right now what I've been noticing, and I'm sure you guys have seen this too, is that it's really like a case by case basis. Like you get these days where certain sectors get hammered, and other stocks and individual stocks and individual sectors like rally big time, right? And so it's pretty interesting how that works, and it's kind of like on a day-to-day basis, right? There's the technology stocks have been doing great, and a lot of a lot of retail stocks and the airlines and financials and this and that. While they're getting a little bit of a bid today because of the news, but prior to that, they were looking pretty rough, right? And so, in hotels, and so basically, it's sort of everything's like a case by case basis, and on a day to day basis, you just never know what to expect, right? And so there's a lot of big moves that are happening. So what I wanted to do is just you can see where these stocks. There's a lot of open trades here. There's actually a new one for today. I think we're going to take a look at that. But what I wanted to do is we'll start at the bottom of this list and work our way up and just take a look and see, how these open trades are doing. This one here, this FATE, this is the one that's been open, the swing trade that's been open for the longest. Opened on 6/9 this particular day right here. Actually, it triggered on 6/9 with this close above the trigger, and then so the following morning there would have been the entry, and it's kind of it took a little bit of a pullback at first, and then it's just been slowly climbing its way back, and you can see the volatility here. So anyway, these stops have kind of just hung back below the price action. Stock's clearly in an uptrend here. It's just it's kind of resembles what I was talking about before, the up and down from day to day price action. So sort of all over the map on an intraday basis, right? I mean, if you think about it, you know, you had a kind of a long range day up and then a gap up and then it folded over and then you had a little gap down and a rally and a fade and another rally. And so it's kind of, it's kind of treaded water in the context of a fairly decent uptrend. So I never did mark well, let me see. Do I have the target marked on here? Look at that. This target on this thing's way, way up here it's literally off the top of the chart for whatever reason, but it is what it is. So that's a pretty aggressive target too, by the way. I'm not sure I'm not sure why the target on this seems to be so much more aggressive than a lot of other ones that I look at, but the only thing I can figure is the ranges of some of these days. The system looks back at the percentage and the ATRs and all that, and so you had a couple of days back here in May, and you had these days that that basically, when you calculate an ATR on this over a month's period of time, this thing can really move, right? So all it will take is a little breakout here and a few up days, and that target's more than likely achievable, but it's out there. So moving on, the second oldest um, open trade here is none other than Barrick Gold, which, I remember when the ticker symbol on this used to be ABX, and then I believe they merged with somebody or whatever. But speaking of gold, there's several gold stocks that are open trades right now, this being the first one. And yesterday, gold, basically came close. I don't know what it's doing today, the actual, and of course, you can talk about GLD or the physical price of gold or the futures price GC. But regardless, I mean, gold's up near the high. And this one's done pretty well. You can see we've talked about this sort of at length since it's been open with a few weeks here, and still looking pretty good, right? I actually drew this uptrend line a while back, and you can see how these stops have kind of, interestingly enough, the stops have been trailing up. Now, when I was updating this last night, I could have put this here. Basically the stop. Here we go. So if this was the update last night, right? It's basically for today. And so, it probably won't move since it's pulling back a little bit. Won't move tonight, but that's basically how it goes. Yeah, so it's just kind of interesting how the stop has been trailing up, trailing up, trailing up. This thing's it hit the target relatively quickly and then kind of hung around the target. And yesterday looked like it was going to break out. And then, of course, today getting a little bit of a pullback here. So it's one of those things where obviously, gold's probably going to struggle a little bit right up at the prior high. Usually, I mean, that seems like the big point of resistance would be the prior all-time high, especially on the price of the physical gold. And so these gold stocks are going to have varying degrees of tracking that. So anyway, yeah, this was a decent pick. Nice little sort of pivot low there and a trend line break, and caught it relatively early. And so everything looking good here. But the next one, when I was looking at these last night, this next one, this Newmont Mining, um, boy, that's kind of a nice little pattern there, like a cup pattern. It's got a pretty good look to it. So out of these gold stocks, now it hasn't quite performed as well as Barrick, but this pattern where it's sort of forming this cup here has a pretty darn good look to it. Now, of course, today notwithstanding, we've seen that before, and of course, the other thing is that it's reached a resistance area right here. and so it may have a little retrenching to do. You can kind of see from back over here, like it had a big rally, and then when it sort of started selling off over here, there's a little gap right there, and you got this low and this high, and so you can pretty clearly see on the chart that it reached sort of a little bit of a resistance area yesterday, and then of course today it's fading back down. So the good news is that the trailing stop has moved up to pretty darn close to the trigger price over here, and so it is what it is. This last little sort of retrenchment here and this move up, if it loses that low, then who knows, right? So it's part of the idea of the system is that as time goes on, we'll see this on a couple other ones. As time goes on, the goal of the system is to get that stop, up as close as possible to break even, right? Still respecting like the prior lows, and so that reduces the risk a lot. So the initial stop, kind of starts off at the bottom of the pattern, and let's see, at this point, you wouldn't want to just have set like a stop down here and just leave it. So the system is like proactive, and the idea is to like catch a stock that's got some forward momentum, and get that stop trailing up along with the forward momentum, leaving just enough room for sort of normal pullbacks without getting knocked out. But as time goes on, the goal of the system is to get that stop up to at least break even so that there's hardly any risk on the trade. So next on the list here is, and it doesn't, I mean, it looks kind of impressive, right? It looks relatively impressive on the chart, but as of last night, now it's down a few percent today, but as of last night, this thing was up 36%, right? Yesterday's close was 36% higher than the trigger price. So this is, and I mean, hey, so that's pretty amazing, to tell you the truth. It happened relatively quickly. You can see and these trend lines, I just drew these along the way to kind of point out how everything sort of makes sense as far as what the system on the back end is doing. But anyway, so yeah, you had this pullback, and then it broke the trend line, and this day it triggered. So the following morning, that would have been the entry, and then a couple days later, it just blasted off. And I mean, so quite frankly, the majority of the gain in this particular stock came within these couple of days right here. You can see it just blasted through the target, and then it's kind of been consolidating up here to higher level, and even now over the past 4 days, you've seen like that up down price action. So just like the market. And the funny thing is that, I mean, the way that I watch CNBC. I've been watching a little bit less than normal lately, but I always have it on in the office for kind of background noise. But it's crazy how there's so much volatility out there now, and especially in individual stocks. And when you get these like up down days like that, it's like the sentiment just sort of flips on a dime from day to day, right? And so a stock like this with these are some pretty big moves intraday, dollar wise especially, and so, like, yesterday it looked like, boy, this thing's off to the races. And you could have put another bar on top of here to new highs or whatever, but this is still looking pretty good. And quite frankly, this stop may come up a little bit. So still a lot of promise here. And the trailing stop is still significantly over the trigger and over the target too. So this has been like the biggest winner in a while, up 30, well, call it 33% right now, roughly. So there you go. And so, which makes this one seem, as of last night, this one was up 20%. Doesn't seem like that huge of a big deal. And the funny thing about FOLD, as you guys recall, I've been talking about the past few weeks since it past couple weeks since it triggered in is that this is one that like triggered in prematurely. And I did mention that sometimes they do that, they gap up on news or earnings or something like that and then just take off from there. And so, still kind of valid, but it just, this is one where theoretically, if it had consolidated at a lower level, then the trigger price would have come down and probably met it, probably closer to 11 and a half bucks, over here. But instead, it got put on the pending list and then boom, just like triggered in very quickly. And so, a lot of stocks do this. They pop and then they just run up really quick. So here it is, hanging right around the target price, up roughly 20% from, actually a little bit less from where the entry would have been, but it is what it is. So let's move on here. WERN, this one is not doing a whole lot. Transportation trucking. It's still, this is still a fairly decent chart. You got the big uptrend here, big rally higher, and then you've got the nice orderly pullback right there. And then rather than just like turning around and resuming the uptrend, it kind of broke out and has just been trading in I don't even want to put a box around that, but I could. But it's just been trading sort of sideways, right? No huge big deal. The stop it looks like it's only moved one time, and so this thing's just gonna, it's gonna consolidate and either break back out or it's gonna fail. I almost hate to see that's almost too steep of an uptrend line there. I usually because this has got enough leeway, I should say. This stop down here is providing enough sort of leeway for the stock to do what it's going to do if it's going to resume the uptrend after this pullback. And so we'll have to see what happens with that. Of course, transportation trucking may or may not be the best industry right now. Quite frankly, I don't really follow it that well, right? It's not a tech stock, obviously, and it's not a precious metal stock, so we'll just have to see. Moving on, MDB. And by the way, I'm starting from the oldest to the newest. That's how I like to do it. I think it makes more sense than going the other way. But so Mongo database, that's what the MDB stands for, is getting kind of close to it's gotten close to the target over the past week or so up here at the highs. And the cool thing about this is that, like what I was sort of saying before, it's relatively sort of a tame uptrend, I guess you could call it. Just take off like a rocket or whatever, and I mean, there's intraday volatility, but it's just sort of triggered in. Trigger price was 207, so it would have triggered in right here at the open this day, 209, and this day right here, so on 622, kind of, that was the next step up, and then it stepped up to sort of a new level here. And the cool thing about this is how this trailing stop came up, and this is what I was talking about as far as time. I could extend that out because it hasn't moved since the price is basically just sort of been trading in a range. This trailing stop is just kind of hanging back here, waiting for, if the stock were to break out, to the upside, go through this target or whatever, then that stop is going to trail up, probably just below this low or somewhere in that neighborhood. And so, the trailing stop's done a good job. This is actually a great example of how you want to see the stop trail up. And since it's past the trigger right now, that's the optimum scenario, right? I mean, the optimum scenario is that, and you can see that when this thing triggered in here, the initial stop was like way down here below the pattern, at the low of the pattern low. And so at that point, if it had rolled over whatever, there was, considerable risk between the entry and the initial stop. And so that's what you want to see is you want to see that stop. You want to see the stock obviously move up, and then you want to see that stop come up quickly enough to like basically, protect the position so that, the closer it is to break even, the better off you are because then obviously you can't lose anything on it. So this is a win-win right here. Um, whether it tags the target or even if it were to come back down here and hit that trailing stop, it's a win-win. So, and it's an expensive stock too, but as I've been mentioning recently, zero commissions and zero commissions make this all even more feasible than back in the old days, right? So, I mean, and so that's why, and now I'm seeing all these commercials for like fractional shares, which is kind of interesting. So you can you can actually not even have to trade a whole share, but I mean, that I suppose is for like, Amazon and that you get people, they put, $100 into Amazon and kind of a cool idea. You wonder though, I mean, as long as I've been doing this, you wonder if I suppose fractional shares have been sort of around in some capacity for a long time, but they're selling it a little bit. They're packaging them a little bit different now. So anyway, so yeah, Mongo database. It was up 9% as of yesterday, hanging in there pretty well. Doesn't look like it'll take much to tag that target, and so percentage wise, I mean, the thing of it is that I mean, we've looked at like the open trades already are all over the map as far as the stock price, and so the system doesn't really care about the price. It's dealing in percentages when it comes to everything and ranges. And so, here's the thing: this one's up 9% roughly, and that's all that matters. And so, if you make 9% on a $12 stock or 9% on a $200 stock, that's all that matters, right? Moving on, LRN. This is an interesting one too because you can see the previous trade, and then this is where it got taken out way back here on this particular day, but up here. So we had a really good trade in this, and then like a 4 or 5 day sell off, and then boom, triggered right back in, and kind of doing something similar to last time. So very interesting. I don't think. No, I haven't marked the target on this one. So you can see back here, the trigger was 2350 and the target was 2550. This time the trigger was 2560 and the target the target's been hit. Interesting. 2750, the target got hit yesterday. I hadn't marked it on here yet. So there we go. Hovering right around the target as we speak today. So let me mark that real quick here. Yeah, and again, it's all about the percentages. So this target 2750. Yeah, I'm going to say about 6.5%. 6.5% from the trigger price up to where the target was. And so there you go. This stop the stop should move up fairly significantly today, I would imagine. It's based on time, it's based on price and time. And so if a stock if a stock basically like, takes off, but only a couple of days have gone by, like as of yesterday, this was still hanging back because you can see. I mean, this is actually sort of beautiful because you can see where it triggered in and then it had these two big down days that they didn't stop it out, right? And it's because the initial stop was like right here, and then so this particular day when it sort of bounced back or whatever, then that stop went right just under like that low there. And so that's sort of the idea. And of course it's all automated, right? Everything's all automated. And so the system knows, or it calculates where the optimum place is for the stop so that you can have normal price fluctuation but not get knocked out of the trade. That's the idea. Moving on, another precious metal stock. Um, Same sort of thing here. I've got my own, some lines I drew on the chart here to kind of demonstrate what I talked about before. Uptrend, pullback, sort of based out, turn the corner here. There's the progression of the stop. The stop right now is well, the trigger was 40.30, right? The stop's 40.40, but this is a weird one because theoretically, the day that it triggered in, it closed significantly over the trigger price, and then the following morning it gapped up significantly. And so this is one of those cases where this is one of those cases where you may or may not have wanted to. Well, we in this case, and I've talked about this before, we just recommend taking a taking a half position, um, taking a half position at the open when it triggers in, and then setting a limit order for the other half. And the funny thing is that the lows here, the lows still have not hit the trigger price, right? So this is kind of a weird one. As good as it looks, sometimes it's just they just kind of do something that you don't want them to do, and with the gaps, right? The long range bars and the gaps, and then you would hope it'd pull back to the trigger price and fill you, but it didn't, and so it's just kind of not the ideal, not really the ideal. The setup looks pretty good, but and this would have been this is the third precious metal stock on the list, and so I did talk about. And speaking of which, moving on, here's the fourth one. And so I mentioned this back when we were looking at the pending trades that you probably wouldn't want to like really concentrate that much on a bunch of different stocks in the same sector. So part of the idea, there's some picking and choosing that goes on. And so back at the beginning of June, or I guess mid-June, when we were looking at all these gold and silver stocks, precious metal stocks, were setting up on the pending list, I suggested that maybe you take the first one or the first and second one, which would have been GOLD and Newmont, and then probably these other two here. You would have said, well, hey, I'm already in a couple of gold stocks, so I don't really see any reason to concentrate even further. And so anyway, this one opened on 622, triggered in on 622, and then so you can see it's just basically sort of hanging around what would have been the entry here. Stops moved up. This is kind of an expensive stock, but the stops come up to just under the trigger price, so not a whole lot of risk here. And hey, it's turned the corner too. So it's a matter of how these precious metal stocks perform going forward on how this one's going to work out. But at least um, at least there's not a whole lot of risk in this. Moving on down the list, Central Garden and Pet Company. Huh, that's interesting. That's an interesting looking sort of chart, but we had a big sort of, uptrend off of like the March lows, right? and a little bit of there's not much of a pullback, but sort of a retracement, retrenchment, and then turned the corner pretty well. And so, and this has only been open for a few days here. So this is kind of notice that the increments on the price scale are only a quarter. So this does not look like a high volatility stock as far as percentages go. So 3220 um 3220 was the trigger price, closed over the trigger this day. The open the following day was 3232, so right there in that neighborhood, which is what you kind of like to see. And then had a really good day, took another leg up, and looking pretty good here. Actually looking pretty good. So the stop has had a chance to move up one time. My guess is just sort of eyeballing this chart here that after the update tonight, this stop will probably move up to the neighborhood of the actual trigger there. And so target on this is 3450, which looks pretty reasonable based on everything else. Now it is like, basically a close over 3450 would be, a new high close on this cycle. So, but it looks doable. It looks doable to at least poke up through there. So, we'll have to see. Let me mark that on here. Target 3450 on the nose. Yeah, so this is it's kind of interesting. You don't see this too often where the pullback shallow, the actually triggered in on a long range bar, but then you got a couple of up days that took it almost straight to the target. It came really close to the target yesterday. The high 34.34, and so it was 16 cents away from the target. So yeah, it's just kind of a whole different thing. And quite frankly, I'm not even familiar with this company at all. Look at that. It's CENTA. So very unusual. Okay, moving on. Only got a few more here. QGEN. Nice pullback. Nice sort of move up, and now it's kind of the forward progress is not moving so well. I honestly, when it says research services, I'm not sure what this company does. It's a foreign company, but so there it is. The initial stop hasn't even moved yet. The funny thing is that it was kind of it was kind of on its way, like it triggered in, 43 or whatever, and it was kind of on its way to making a decent move, but here's another one. Look at the price scale. 25-cent increments, right? So this is kind of a low volatility stock. And so like you look at this and you're like, wow, look at this stop way down here. It's only a buck. Right? So percentage wise, um, it's a buck on a $43 stock, $42, $43 stock, but was reasonable. And so basically, here's the thing is like you got that pivot high and you got a few days of a pullback, and basically all it needs to do is like make a higher low here and then turn back up and it'll look pretty good. So it's kind of a slow mover, not a big not an extremely volatile stock. So this one does tend to trend pretty well. And it's just a little unusual that how it turned the corner and then is retrenching here. But so far today, it could be one of the like a counter trend type of stock. There's a lot of those out there. They sort of move like counter to the market on a day-to-day basis. So two more left, including one that's just triggering in today that we'll look at here. So Akamai. Um, Akamai never really had this is kind of a little bit unusual because you don't see a huge pullback on this chart. I mean, basically it's sort of range bound and so, it is what it is. There's a lot of ups and downs here, and I suppose, I suppose that somewhere along the lines, one of these counted as a pullback enough for this to, and it triggered in kind of at a spot where it broke out of a range, and so this has been a pretty strong stock, but so anyways, it is what it is. Quite frankly, I look at this chart and I see all this chopping around and up and down, and I would think, yeah, you have the flexibility, obviously, to pick and choose which ones you want to get in. Now, here's the thing. I mean, Akamai is a very well respected name when it comes to, investing or whatever and this and that. And it's right up near the highs. So there's every chance that this thing can bust out of the highs and keep going, technology company. But to me, the chart is not extremely expiring like some of the other ones are. So last but not least, IPHI triggering in today as we speak. Big run up here, nice sort of orderly pullback, and a consolidation sideways. And so there you go. And so finally yesterday it kind of managed to close above all this recent range here. You got kind of a pivot low right here. And so or IPHI semiconductor. Interesting. So a semiconductor stock, which quite frankly, the semiconductors I think had a pretty big day here recently, or had a big day yesterday. There was a couple of them that released earnings, and so there you go. There's the initial stop down below the low of the pattern, and so as we speak here, it's trading right around the trigger price. While I'm here, I might as well mark the target on here, which is 125 bucks. Totally doable. Some of these, you guys have seen this. I marked this up, and the stock's got to break out to a new high to hit the target on some of them, and some of them the target is, within sort of proximity to the recent high. Because as you know, the system is finding a stock that, was in an uptrend, had a pullback, starts to turn the corner to resume the uptrend. And, a lot of times it's going to look like a cup forming. and so, you can kind of visualize the cup forming here. And that target, the target is kind of like right up at the prior highs, but totally looks doable here. A decent like 2-day run, like it's had plenty of times, put it right up there at the target. So actually looking pretty good. It's looking pretty good there, and obviously today, being the trigger day or whatever, it's kind of nice to see it trade at the trigger price, because sometimes they gap up and then they go up and you think, well, geez, I feel like I'm chasing it or whatever. So at least like when they actually trade at the trigger price, the day that they trigger in, then it gives you a reasonable shot at it. So anyway, so that's that. And I'm gonna go ahead, and you can do what I did here, just basically jam through the charts of the pending trades, see what you think. Take a look at this pending trades list real quick, but I'm not going to own. So by the way, on the the pending trades list is where you'll find the stocks that are triggering today, and so you'll see all the details there. So that's got a 4.8% average daily range, which is fairly significant, right? Like typically 2%, 2 to 3 average range is kind of tame, and the closer you get to 5, So you can look at some of these here. Look at that, ExxonMobil. Huh. And XOP, that's kind of interesting. Real quick, let's just look at XOP for the fun of it. Um, yeah, there you go. So that's kind of, XOP, obviously, this is an ETF, right? And it's just it got crushed when the price of oil dropped and the pandemic sell off. But um, zooming in on a closer time frame, you had a pretty big run, right? Pretty big run, and then now you've had a pullback, and theoretically, you could be turning a corner here. And boy, this thing can move. So, um, trigger price on this is up here. If this turns the corner, if it turns the corner, you get I mean, look at this. Look at that move. That's extraordinary. So it's a little bit different. Not a whole lot of ETFs have been showing up recently, but this one met all the criteria, and so there you go. If for whatever reason, if this drops back down and makes a new low, it may just disappear from the list. I don't know, but I mean it's a fairly decent setup. So, and of course, this is a pretty good example. This is a pretty good example of like why you'd want to wait for a close over the trigger price, right? Like you don't want to just buy at the trigger price. What's the high here today? 53.23. So the trigger price is 53 on this right now. So close over 53, which looks pretty reasonable. So, and then yeah, this is pretty volatile. What is the yeah, 4.9%. That's significant. And so, that means over the past, month it's averaged a 5% move. Now you had a couple of, huge days up and down here, so extremely volatile. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what happens with this. So, anyway, tomorrow is the final trading day of the week, right? Holiday shortened week for 4th of July. So I hope you all have a great 4th of July weekend. And I don't have big plans, so I never really do. But so anyway, be kind of a muted 4th of July for a lot of people this year. But I hope you have a good 4th of July weekend. Stay safe, and I will see you back here next week.